Hello and welcome to today's webinar presented by O3 Solutions and Andrew Foy, the AWP Conundrum, What's in it for Engineering? So before we get started, I'd like to make everyone aware of an event we're hosting in Houston on Tuesday, May 14th, the AWP Exchange. This is a invitation only, but we would invite you to request an invitation. We would be more than happy to accommodate you in joining us there. So it's a small group of owners, EPCs, and partners, and it's a very highly valued conversation around AWP and using software to support your programs. You'll have a chance to network and learn how the industry leaders have implemented it successfully using O3's technology. So we invite you to request an invitation if you are in town and able to come. So first up, we'll do a safety moment, and then I will introduce our speaker here, Andrew Foy, and then he will walk you through who is O3, and then our topic of today, what's in AWP for engineering, including the 4 levels of AWP maturity, and then some key takeaways, and then you'll have a chance to ask us a question. And with that in mind, you are welcome to submit a question throughout today's presentation, and then we will answer it at the end as time permits. So with that, you have a control panel there to your right. Please use that to submit any questions you may have. And then we will offer you some information and resources to learn more. So today's safety moment is on the importance of communication. It may seem obvious and common sense, and it usually is, but it's always good to keep top of mind. And this comes from the incidentprevention.com. Begin with a positive outlook, create an environment to be heard, set the stage for the conversation, be tactful and concise, avoid abrupt, offensive, or accusatory statements, be sure to listen and agree where you can, and encourage standards and advocate for success. So you always just want to create an environment where people feel comfortable that they can communicate something. And, as the cliche may go, see something, say something, but it's important to also listen. So today's speaker is Andrew Foy. He's the VP of AWP and Construction here at O3 Solutions. And the key thing to understand today as relevant to this topic is that he's the principal author of the CII Leading Practice AWP and Engineering. He has many other accolades and is more than qualified to speak to us today about engineering and AWP. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Tari, and I will try to respect item number 4 on the previous slide and be both tactful and concise as we go through this. So first up, I'll give a very, very brief overview of O3 Solutions. So O3 Solutions is the market-leading AWP and digital project management software. We mostly operate in the energy sector. Obviously, AWP started in oil and gas. We're seeing it now proliferate out into other areas. We're seeing nuclear, manufacturing, mining, lots of other sectors that are embracing it as a concept. Most of our work is, we range everything from small brownfield portfolio style projects all the way up to the tens of billions of dollars, mega and giga projects. So we do projects of all shapes and sizes, and we cover all the time zones across the world. Actually, today I'm calling you from Portugal. So welcome, hello from Europe. We've been doing this for quite a while now. O3 was the first of the modern solutions for AWP. So we were the first of the cloud-based products to support AWP and workplace planning. We've done over 550 projects. We've worked with dozens of owners, EPCs, contractors, and most importantly, we've had more than 20,000 users in the software. So all of those lessons learned and improvements and feedback are all baked into the software and made available to our users. Okay, that's a little plug about O3. Now we're going to get onto the main topic. AWP, what's in it for engineering? So why are we here? On the right-hand side, there's a little blog post that our CEO put out a little while back that talks about how AWP forgot about engineering. I think there's a general understanding or expectation within the industry, certainly within a lot of people that I've spoken to or worked with over the years, that engineering views AWP as something that has to be done for construction. oh, construction's struggling, construction needs help, we have to do this thing. It's something that we're going to have to do to benefit them. It's seen as sometimes, and this may not be true of your organization, but it's seen in a lot of organizations, I think, as a chore, a necessary evil, just one more thing that we have to do. We're not seeing many organizations recognize the value of AWP for engineering itself. So we're going to try and cover some of that today. And the way we're going to look at this is by exploring the 4 levels of AWP for engineering. We very deliberately numbered these 0, 1, 2, 3 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, mostly because level 0 is the status quo. We're not doing AWP. We're not really getting involved. Level 1 then gets into, okay, we're starting to look at workplace planning and what engineering needs to do to support workplace planning. Level 2 gets into, okay, now we recognize the value of workplace planning, and we're going to start to pull AWP backwards into those engineering stages. And then level 3, this is the top end where we've actually got the engineering team fully on board and recognizing the full execution value of AWP and the benefits of that to engineering directly. So let's start with level 0, status quo. So this is what I would call the traditional approach. So this is where during the early stages of a project, engineering is optimized for engineers. There's nobody from construction involved, or if there is, it's very, very rare and oftentimes too late. So what happens is engineering is planning their work. They're building these beautiful waterfall P6 schedules. They're figuring out these long and complicated things that they're going to have to do to start putting together drawings. And then we get to this fence, this barrier, and engineering is dropping stuff over the fence to construction. Now, this is not engineering's fault. We're not pointing fingers. What we're saying is this is the way they've been governed. They've been told, right, your scope is this. You're doing engineering. And they're dropping things over the fence to construction. And construction's attitude is, okay, this is what I'm getting, so I'm going to have to make the most of it. I once sat down with a construction person early on in a project and said, how do you want to build this? And he looked at me like I was crazy because nobody in his 35 years at that stage that he'd been working had ever asked him how he wanted to do it. He was used to just being handed a bunch of stuff and told, make it work. So during this sort of level 0 status quo, we also see construction forced to start too early. We've been waiting for drawings. So the second we get the first set of drawings, go to the site, start doing something. And then what happens is construction is rushed to start and the engineering can't keep up. So construction becomes start, stop, start, stop. So what does it look like in terms of the investment in this traditional sense? So during the engineering phase, we're seeing no construction presence. Engineering is done at an engineering office and it's run entirely by the engineering contractor. In the construction phase, now we're introducing the construction managers, discipline superintendents, and for those doing workplace planning, suddenly we've got workplace planners trying to corral the information they're getting from engineering and turn it into something meaningful to be done for construction execution. We're seeing P6 schedules, and the reason I very deliberately say schedules plural is because we'll often see engineering has their schedule, construction has theirs, and somebody's trying to sort of force these two things to line up or meet, but they never meet very easily. We're using typically Excel to do things like materials management, drawing management, and reporting of progress. We have a lot of backwards facing reports. Here's what happened last week or 2 weeks ago. And we're managing a lot of this just using things like S-curves for progressing. So what are the outcomes? Construction starts too soon. We don't have a sufficient backlog. We've been rushed to the field because there's that overlap between engineering and construction. And as soon as we got something for you to do, go. Installation activities keep then getting pushed around because I want to do my construction work in a reasonable sequential fashion. But if I've only got engineering to support this and then this and then this and then this, I have to keep looping all over the place to do what I can with what I have. Because of that, we can't maintain schedule dates. We can't really maintain a constructive schedule because we don't have the deliverables to support them. We also see things like safety and quality suffer. How many times have you been involved in a root cause analysis for a safety incident? If you go deep enough, you will nearly always see some element of change management as a root cause to the safety incident. We were starting this work. We couldn't complete it because we ran out of drawings or materials or didn't have a crane or whatever it was. So we got shunted over here to do something else. And then when we set up over there, we didn't take the time to think about it fully and somebody got hurt. One of the root causes is we keep changing things on people. So what does the technology look like at this stage? Everybody's best friend, Microsoft Excel, right? Everybody's got their spreadsheets. I think, I've heard some astounding numbers for the number of spreadsheets that exist on projects or within companies. It's more zeros than you could possibly want to count. The issues are typically rear facing. What we're looking at is here's what happened rather than here's what's going to happen, which means I can't influence the future. I can't see problems when they're coming. I can only see here's what we did. So we're doing a great job of accounting for what we did. We're doing a bad job of looking forwards. And if we then try to apply any element of AWP, yes, okay, we can do things like workplace planning. There is a path here to getting some value out of this. We can support, O3 can support the construction work with or without support from engineering. So if you are getting that sort of stuff thrown over the fence at you, it can still be done and we can consume the engineering data, but it's less than optimal in how we're going to do it. So that's level 0. That's the status quo. So let's take now the first step towards engineering's involvement in AWP, and we're going to look at workplace planning. So again, from a process perspective, we are now seeing the introduction of things like constructability reviews. We're starting to look at that engineering data to understand how that's going to play a role in the work that we need to do for workplace planning. So we're now starting to bring people in. So we're just starting to see construction managers, discipline superintendents, but constructability is a very, very important topic, and it's a very, very important thing to do. If we catch it early enough, it's very, very valuable, but it's typically sporadic. I've been involved in constructability reviews where you get 20 people in a room for a day and you do this big long process, and then everybody dissipates. The construction people are off doing another project, the engineers get back to what they're doing, and you've got this small action list that comes out of it. So it's a valuable added thing, but it's not being repeated, it's not being done frequently enough. We're also now starting to see involvement of things like 3D models, a document management system, a materials management system, purpose designed tools to help support some of this scope. So we do get a slight improvement in construction planning by using constructability. For any of you familiar with that sort of constructability influence curve, in the early stages it starts high, your influence is high, the cost is low. As you go further, the cost goes up and the influence goes down. So the later you wait to do that construction input, the less impact that it can have and the more it's going to cost you. We're starting to see enhanced data integrity now. We're starting to do a more systematic approach to our data management rather than everything having to be keyed in. We're using tools and systems to do it rather than lots of Excel spreadsheets. We want to get value out of that 3D model. You've paid to have the engineers develop a 3D model, and we want to be able to use that for construction. But to do that, engineering has to understand what data do I need to put in it? What needs to be in this model for it to be valuable for the next phase of the project? And yet, we're still, even though we're getting advancements from this, most of constructability is about, can I build it? Whereas what we need to be focusing on is how can I build it and how should it be built in the best sequence. So even with this level, yes, we're starting to see improvements, but we're still not getting that true sequence alignment from engineering to construction. So from a technology perspective, we can use things like O3 to help provide that constructability review, visualization of the scope. Most construction people that I've worked with over the years are very, very visual people. You show them, you tell them you've got a big report to read through, not much use. You put it on a 3D model on a big screen and allow them to move around it and pivot around it and see what's happening. All of a sudden you can look at it from every angle and get a good understanding of the access constraints, the spatial considerations. You can start carving it up to modules. You can start looking at how many people am I going to have to put in this working area for this to work. So that visualization can provide very, very valuable tools for that constructability review. and we can start to look at the engineering data. And the trick with this is to start looking at it early. Don't wait until 2 weeks before construction to say, I wonder if our engineering data is any good. So let's start reviewing that 3D model early. Let's give the list to the engineers to say, here's the things you need to put in it, and then hold them accountable for doing so. We can then start tying into that materials management system, that document management system, and see this data in real time. So we can start to do a health check early on, fix the problems early on, and make sure that by the time we get to construction, we're ready to go. Okay, level 2. So this is where we're starting to see engineering being the concept of AWP being pulled back into those engineering stages, and engineering taking a more, I won't say active role, but a more collaborative role with construction in those early phases. So we're taking things like the engineering data, the drawings, the constructability review as taken from that previous level. Now what we're adding to this is path of construction. How are we actually going to do it? Are we going to build it left to right, north to south, top to bottom? Whatever that sequence is, that should be the greatest collaboration exercise between engineering, procurement, and construction in those early stages. And yes, also bring in the commissioning and startup folks so that we can start to have an understanding not just of how we're going to build it, but how we're going to turn it over. So this should be the first time that everybody, and this is sort of pre-feed, feed, FEL2, FEL3, select define, depending on what terminology you use, where we get together and say, right, we've got something as simple as a plot plan. How are we going to build this thing? And then construction will say, I want to do this and this and this. Engineering gets to be the voice of reason in the room to an extent to say, well, look, if obviously you want to drive the piles and then put the foundation and then put the equipment on top, but we need to know how much the equipment weighs to tell you what the foundation design is going to look like, to know how many piles we need to support it, for example. But what we're doing is having that discussion and understanding to align that sequence so that everybody knows, I want that first, then that, then that, then that. We're not changing the way that engineering engineers or designs the systems or the solution to the actual project. What we're doing is just trying to sequence and prioritize it. So one of the ways we can do this is we start to break the engineering work down into what we call EWPs, engineering work packages. So instead of pipe or piping being a single discipline, a single line, a 12-month activity, we can break things down into areas and disciplines as the very simplest basis. So we start to say pipe in area 2, steel in area 7, those become discrete packages with a start and a finish date, with a list of deliverables. And when they are complete, that package can be released IFC and then becomes an executable scope for construction. And what it does is it starts to give us a chance to align. Here's what engineering is doing. At the end of it, we've got this release, and then construction can take it and run with it from there. What we're also starting to look at in this stage is constraint management. So constraint management has historically been something that we've considered very, very well in recent years for construction. Do I have the drawings? Do I have the materials? Do I have access to the site, etc.? But only now are we seeing companies applying that same logic to engineering. There are constraints on engineering. I need approval from the owner. I need a contract. I need a geotechnical survey. I need to know the weight of this vessel and the nozzle orientation, etc., etc. There's 1,000 things that engineering has to know that's not in their control. So we can start applying that same concept of constraint management directly to engineering. So what does this look like in terms of process, people, and technology? In terms of the investment side of things, we're starting now to bring in those planners and schedulers. And just to be clear, in our world, in the world of AWP, a planner is the person who's designing the package and the sequence and the AWP side of it. A scheduler is somebody who runs P6. So during that phase, the construction managers, the discipline superintendents, they're not just popping in for an hour or so here or there or turning up once every couple of months for a constructability review meeting. They are involved in the project. They're reviewing the documentation, they're reviewing the plot plan, they're reviewing the plans, they're figuring out how things are going to come in, how we're going to move things from one area to another, how we're going to build this thing. And that has to then integrate with your schedule. And the beauty of this is if you're doing it well, that schedule no longer becomes here's what engineering's doing and completely disconnected, here's what construction's doing. It's an integrated schedule where we can see here's this EWP, it has a start and finish date, and when it's finished, I can then transition that scope to construction. We're also able to incorporate things at this stage like RFI management. So the minute you get construction involved, they're always going to have questions. And you can give the technology to allow construction to ask the questions and have a very visual portal that allows engineering to respond, answer, and everybody can see the status of all of these questions and the questions and answers at all stages. So the benefits we're starting to get out of this is engineering is now getting in alignment with the construction priorities. It's not just a dictatorial approach. It's not construction. Construction is not emailing a document and saying, do it like this. This is why it has to be that collaboration exercise. For example, a project I did a few years ago, we spent months and months in the engineer's office during feed. And by the time we got to the end of feed, through many meetings with the engineering contractor, our path of construction was revision 10 by the end of feed, because we kept adapting, we kept improving it, we kept knowing more, we kept getting better information and working with the engineers and the procurement people to understand what's the reality of how we can do this and how are we best able to sequence it. And their schedule then lined up with ours. And we can start to see those deliverables. So we get that engineering broken down into discrete packages. We can track those EWPs, track them to their end date, track progress against them. Are they going to get done on time? Instead of just piping design is 47% complete, yay. The percentage complete doesn't tell me if we're building the right things. It only tells me we've cranked out X number of ISOs in the last week, etc. And also critically, we're identifying those constraints. So I always tell this to the engineering teams, this is great for you, because instead of the whole pointing fingers and he didn't do this and they didn't do this and she didn't give me this and whatever, these constraints are identified, mapped out, assigned to somebody, given a due date, and then tracked and progressed. So you sit in a meeting and you call up, this is our EWP. I can't progress this because I haven't got the constraint release that I need from the vendor or procurement or the owner. It's a great way of keeping owner organizations honest, without having to get a lot of sort of contractual and legalese involved. The only downside of this whole process, I think, still, even at this level 2, from what I've seen in the past, engineering is still doing this for the benefit of others. So this is still the sort of last stage of in this evolution of we're doing this for the sake of construction. I think by this stage we're getting to the point of we're doing this for the sake of the project, which is great. So in level 0 we're not doing it. In level 1 we're really doing it for the sake of construction. In level 2 we understand that it's better for the project if everything's in alignment and harmony. And in terms of what's in it for engineering, you've got a happy client because they recognize that you're working collaboratively with the construction team. They're more likely to give you more work, right? Simple as that. So this is a good step forward from the last one, but we're still not yet at the engineering doing it for their own benefit. In terms of technology, we can take that. So path of construction can be done in a multitude of ways. In the early stages, we can take a 2D plot plan and colorize that and mark that up and have a Gantt view of that and see different construction areas being worked on. And then when we graduate to having a 3D model, so later in the feed stage, for example, we can start to use that 3D model as the basis for a 4D simulation. And this can be done on the whole site level. It can be done right down to, as you're seeing here, a single pipe rack. So we can start doing some of that review of the plan for construction installation. We can start to do some of that optioneering. How would it work if we did it like this and this? And this is when you end up with Rev 10 of your plan. Because every time you're learning more things, you're developing, you're refining, you're making it better. And we can start to track engineering's progress against these down to that level 3, that EWP level. We've got a schedule that tells me when each EWP should start and finish. Even if there's a bunch of stuff in the middle, or underneath each one of those with a bunch of details that really make sense to the engineers. The key point is, can you tell me the start and finish date for that EWP? And then I can do KPIs and dashboard reporting against those EWPs. There could be dozens or hundreds of EWPs depending on the size of the project. Are we getting things done on time? Are we getting the details to support them? Is it being completed per the schedule? And then the constraint management, as I mentioned, getting this systemized, getting this in front of everybody, getting it in one central location, and everybody can see, what do I have to do? Who owes me something in terms of an action or a deliverable? And the project managers can then focus on the red lights. Here's a problem. You've got this thing. It's past due or it's coming due next week. Are you ready to get it done? And also with the constraints, you can see the trickle down effect. So if I know that this package has a constraint on it, if I don't get this thing done, this engineering work package can't be done. But because we've got a decent linked schedule and associations between packages, I can show then the trickle down effect that says, if that engineering work package isn't done because of this constraint, here's how it's going to affect construction, commissioning, turnover, etc., etc. Okay, last level, level 3. How does engineering support full AWP? So this is where we start to get to AWP benefiting engineering directly. So we're doing our path of construction, we're doing our EWPs, we're doing constructability and data. Now we're starting to take a more detailed and granular approach to managing engineering. So we've done this for many years with construction, where we take a construction work package and break it down into installation work packages. We have yet to wholeheartedly, or certainly industry wide, apply that to the way that engineering work is going to be done. So we can start to look at engineering scope by design work packages, vendor scope by vendor work packages, and then applying that constraint management methodology to these smaller, more discrete packages. So what are these things? I mean, again, you're probably drowning in a sea of acronyms when it comes to AWP, so apologies for introducing two more, but this is part of that AWP for engineering leading practice that's going to be published soon. So DWPs are a subset of the EWPs, and a design work package is the equivalent for engineering of what an IWP would be for construction. So it's a scope package for a single design team or even an individual, depending on what the scope of work is. So instead of saying we've got to design all the pipe in area 7 or all of the equipment in area 9, you can then break it down and treat it in a more agile, scrum-based methodology. Here's what we're going to have to do in the next 2 weeks. Here's the stuff that we need to focus on right now. And here's what we have to clear in order to be able to then move on to the next scope. So in the same way we do with IWPs for construction. So this is taking it down to a kind of level 4 based planning, where we can manage our engineering teams down to finite deliverables with finite timeframes, instead of the minute you see, a schedule activity where it's 6 months long, I don't know whether that's going to be achieved. Whereas if I've got small packages, small chunks of work, what are we working on for the next week or 2 weeks? We have a lot better granularity and a lot better control over that work. And then the VWPs are a similar concept for vendors. So too many times, too many jobs, vendor data and vendor interaction is treated on a first in, first out approach. Oh, we've got this now, right, let's do something with it. Or somebody's yelling at procurement to go and chase the vendor to get the weight or the center of gravity or the nozzle elevation or whatever it is. We are very rarely taking a proactive approach to vendor management. So what we can do with these vendor work packages is clearly designate this particular EWP will have pumps and vessels and columns and whatever it is. And here's the vendors that we need to deal with, and it could be multiple. So here's the scope of work for that vendor. Here's the ability to understand their timing for the release of their information, their data, their drawings, the deliverables, whatever it is, and the trickle down effect of that information, as I say, on that EWP. So I know, and I can assign to the vendor, you have to do this for me. You have to get me this thing by this date, and I have visibility on it. Instead of always waiting until it's past due and saying, oh, guess we missed that date, it allows us to take that more front forward approach and support and break down the EWPs into that granularity to know what the vendor data needs to be. So what are we introducing at this stage in terms of investment? All we're really doing is adding some technology. It's the concept of that agile project management and full lifecycle AWP software. I need to be able to manage those vendor packages, manage those design work packages, not have a bunch of emails flying back and forth and a bunch of spreadsheets sitting on SharePoint site somewhere, having everything in one place, a centralized technology repository. Now we're getting into engineering actually getting value out of this. Now we're getting into engineering's really in control of its destiny. I know what my constraints are. I'm managing those constraints at a much more discrete level. I can tell you when something is done or when it's running late or if it's at risk of running late. I can see that status. I can see those constraints. I've got better visibility into, is my vendor getting me what I need at the right time? And if they don't, here's the impact. And you can look at that ahead of time and mitigate it. So the vendor's coming back to you and saying, it's going to be 3 weeks late. Do I need to throw more money at them, get them to work overtime, whatever that is that going to be value added? Well, I can follow the logic of that through my package associations and through my schedule to understand, is it worth throwing more money at it, accepting the delay, finding other ways to mitigate, etc. We're getting now granular scope definition. We're no longer just managing by an S curve. As long as we're ahead of the curve, everybody's happy. You know, those progress meetings where all you do really is talk about problems and look at an S curve. The S curve tells me that overall we're in the right place, but it's not telling me, are we doing the right things? This is how stuff gets left at 90% complete for too long because we don't have the last 10% of the information that we need. So I want granular scopes that get completed, progressed, and assigned to the next user. That clears the decks for engineering for that particular scope and means they can then move on to the next work that they're doing. And critically, improved collaboration across stakeholder groups. I've been in way too many conversations where engineering's blaming construction, construction's blaming engineering, owners mad at both of them. And it's mostly because we're not doing a good enough job of that stakeholder communication. Whereas having that consolidated data platform, having everybody using the same tool, no longer hiding behind a spreadsheet that somebody else can't access because they don't have permission to access your SharePoint folder or whatever it is. I know exactly the status of the work that I'm working on and whatever everybody else is working on. And if I'm the project manager, project director, engineering manager, I can see what's going on, who's working on what, and are we meeting our dates. So in terms of the design work packages, the technology now can allow us to help support that granular breakdown. So this is actually one of those instances where the theory is catching up with the technology. We've had this technology now, we designed this a few years ago, and we're actually helping CII catch up with where the technology is by producing this report that we're talking about in terms of this leading practice. So this is where we're using that level 4 for engineering to say, right, sprint, 2-week sprint for this team. Here's what you're going to work on. Here's the things you're going to have to do. Here's who owns each one of those things. Here's the dates when they need to be done. I can see when they're being done. I can improve my predictability because I can see if that person's always late or if we still got some stuff from the last sprint that we haven't finished off. I know I've got some catch up to do. So this is taking that kind of agile approach to that work scope instead of just having, yeah, these 3 people are doing the design for this whole section here and it'll be done in 4 months' time. And we just account for it by gradual progress of percentage complete, 20%, 30%, whatever. The vendor work packages gives that clear scope identification to the vendors. Who is producing what? We can then automatically create constraint assignment between those vendor data information or the vendor packages and the underlying engineering work packages that they're supporting. So if I haven't got the vendor information that belongs as part of that EWP, I can't do the EWP. So I can assign progress, like rates of placement, rules of credit. When I get my drawings from the vendor, that's 30% complete. When I've done the approvals and sign off, it's 60%. Whatever numbers you use, but it's not just progressing it, it's tracking it against when we said we were going to get it done. And the agile side of things, like I said, this is where we use what we refer to as team boards. So this is just that grouping of work scope. So this can be done in list view, Kanban view, as you're seeing on the screen. You can set it up in such a way that you know exactly what we're working on, what's on hold, what's complete, what's going to be open next week. And you can manage your work in those 2-week sprints, which means everybody knows, here's what I need to get done during this time frame. And by the time we get to the next sprint meeting in 2 weeks' time, I have to account for what I've done and what I failed to do. Okay. A lot of information I've thrown at you in half an hour, so we're going to try and distill this down into a short summary. So at level 0, we are maybe doing workplace planning. If so, probably we're doing non-graphical because we haven't got the data from the 3D model to support it. We're trying to get to improve field productivity. You can make gains for construction at level 0, but from an engineering perspective, this doesn't help us. From engineering, then, level 1, we're starting to support workplace planning. So engineering's bringing the things like the data requirements to the table. We're starting to do some of that constructability work. We're starting to get technology to manage that data. And by using that technology, we're seeing automation and error reduction. Then when we move to level 2, we're really now starting to get into managing engineering using AWP concepts. And that's where we're getting into the EWPs, understanding the breakdown of that scope, discrete packages that have a start and an end date. What are the constraints against those packages? Who owes me what? Who needs to give me something for me to complete my scope? Get away from finger pointing, make it data specific. Use the software, pull up your constraint list in the meetings and say, instead of just, oh, have you done this yet? Here's what it is. Here's when you said you were going to give it to me. That was the promise made. Have you kept it? So that AWP solution like O3 can give you that platform to make it a data-driven approach and data-driven meetings for things like constraint management. We also then start to see the beginnings of real collaboration between engineering and construction. We start to see that alignment. We're starting to get an understanding of here's what engineering is going to produce and give it to construction to execute, and then bringing in the commissioning and completions. And then at level 3, this is where we're really taking it down to managing our engineering with the same veracity as we are doing with construction. We don't let construction just take a CWP and go build it in whatever sequence they want. We'd ask them to break it down to IWPs. So we're starting to take that same approach with engineering. Engineering is really going to be able to get better visibility, better reporting standards, and better buy-in from everybody because they know what the scope of work is, they know what their role in it is. And we can define that down to that DWP and VWP level, and we can apply agile concepts to manage it in 2-week sprints. So for this, the technology is obviously a purpose-built engineering AWP solution. So some of those screenshots you were seeing of how O3 manages this and gets those DWPs and VWPs to support the EWPs. And this is where in the first, in 0, 1, and 2, level 0 engineering is not doing AWP. In level 1, engineering is doing it to support construction. In level 2, engineering is doing it to support the project. And in level 3, engineering is doing it to support construction, the project, but also critically themselves. This is where you get to be, as an owner, as an engineering organization, you get to go back to the owners or anything you're bidding on and say, you know what, we're good at this, we got this, we know what we're doing, here's the sequence, here's how we're going to do it, and here's the technology we're going to use to do it. So, some key takeaways. This is one that we always put in here because I think it's one very, very important, especially when we're talking about multi-levels. It is a journey. We've shown here the 4 levels of AWP in engineering. You do not typically jump from level 0 straight to level 3. The most sort of systematic approach I've seen people do with this is, right, identify what level you are currently at, and then do a gap analysis to the next level. What do we need to improve? What do we need to bring in? What processes, what technology, what people do we need to get us to the next level? Then execute at that next level and do the gap analysis to the next level until you're getting it to the point where we're executing at the top level. And instead of owners telling us, you need to do AWP, you get to go back and say, this is just the way we do it now. This is the way we're doing it across. It becomes business as usual. One of the key things to support that, training. I've done too many meetings with engineering teams where they've got a very basic concept in some cases of AWP, but I've seen this normally where there's this terrifying sort of deer in the headlights look when you're talking to AWP about AWP to some engineering teams, and then you start to explain what we're doing with it and what the point of it is and how it's going to impact them, or more pertinently, not impact them. And the blood pressure tends to come down very, very quickly. So one of the things that we don't do a good job of with training is what doesn't change. So everybody thinks that this is a new thing that's going to completely flip the whole engineering sequence or the whole engineering plan and the methodology on its head. And everybody says, well, we've been doing this for a long time. This is the way we do things. It's not about redesigning the way that the engineering is done. It's about sequencing it. It's about giving a clear understanding of the granularity and the scope breaks of it to create these discrete things that can then be handed on. So engineering can keep doing its thing, but do it in a sequence that supports the project. And then lastly, AWP is not just about construction. It can have a benefit to engineering. We are starting to see companies embracing this, but it's a slow process, the same as it was 10, 15, 20 years ago with the workforce planning side of things for construction, right? It's understanding that if we do a good job, we'll get more work, but also we can look at things like, reduction of waste, level 4 planning, not having to do repeats and rework, improve communication, improve stakeholder management. There's a huge amount of this that can provide a lot of value to engineering. And a lot of that is also explained in more detail in the leading practice that's going to be published soon. So on that note, I've been alluding to this a few times during the presentation today. So as I mentioned, O3 was chairing a joint working group for AWP in engineering to produce a leading practice. What we're looking at is a better understanding of engineering's involvement in the whole AWP process. Engineering does not live in a silo, and it cannot exist in a silo, nor can construction or commissioning or whoever, procurement, anybody. So what are the foundational elements of AWP, and where is engineering involved in that? What role should they play in the steps of engineering throughout? So we looked at the current state of AWP in engineering. What are the common issues that we're facing right now? Things like, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is an engineering's problem, this is construction's problem, or this is just another thing we have to do, or there's too much data, or I have to do more with the 3D model, it's a pain. And then we get into, okay, what does the future state of this look like? What does good look like? So this is where we see AWP is actually a value for engineering. Model data attribution becomes a matter of course. Engineering is involved with the path of construction. We get that early construction input, but again, construction is not sitting in a room on their own. Engineering's in that conversation. It becomes to the point where when an owner comes to you as an engineering organization and says, we want you to do AWP, without making it sound too childish, you should be getting to the stage of, well, duh. Yes, of course, we do this. It's our standard business practice. It becomes embedded in the culture instead of, well, okay, we'll do it for you if we must, or if we need to support construction. So some of the key recommendations that come out of this, and obviously you'll have a chance to read it more fully when it's published. Understand and ensure that engineering knows what its role is in AWP delivery. Why am I having to do this? If you can answer the question, what's in it for me? Why do I have to do this? That's a huge plus. We need to look at the benefits to engineering directly, and those are listed in the document. Standardized delivery to support AWP data. So what do I need to do? What do I need to include? The owner needs to pick up the pace and understand better what the contracting requirements are. Too often we're providing endorsement and engineering is incentivized to do what they normally do, crank out isometrics, get above the S curve, whatever it is. We need that contracting strategy to pivot to support the AWP approach. And then lastly, we get to the cultural stuff, education, training, and stuff like that. Okay, well, that was what I have for you today. If you have any questions, as Tori mentioned at the beginning, please submit them to the GoToWebinar control panel. Tori, have we got anything so far?
Yeah, thank you for that information, Andrew. So we'll just kick it off. Is anyone really using AWP in engineering to find their own benefits?
Yeah, it's starting. It's some companies are, well, as with everything, some companies are further ahead than others. Um, the I would say the biggest way you will see and identify this is for the companies who are doing AWP on projects, the engineering companies who are doing AWP on projects even when the owner isn't mandating it. And we're starting to see that now where it becomes, I don't need you to tell me. We just do this, as I said, business as usual, a matter of course. So I think the more that people are getting used to it, the more that it's becoming the way of doing things. It just becomes the way we do things now. It is slow progress. There are a lot of people still doing very much the old fashioned ways and struggling to get from level 0 even to level 1. But yes, we are starting to see more and more contractors at that level 2 and ultimately at level 3.
Okay, next question. Who owns the technology for AWP in engineering? Owner, EP?
Normally, the answer to that is whoever's driving AWP on the project. But if we're looking at it specifically from an engineering standpoint, what I would normally say is if you're trying to get to the stage where you want to do this as business as usual, you need a technology toolset to do it. If you have, as an engineering organization, if you have a standard toolset to manage AWP, then when the owner comes to you and says, "We want you to do AWP," you can say, "Yep, here's how we do it. Here's our process. Here's our technology. Here's all of this stuff." If you don't have that embedded technology and that embedded process, you're more likely to have it thrust upon you. So if you don't have it, the owner's going to come in and say, "Well, look, we've got something here. Now you've got to learn how to use it." So if this is something that you're really taking seriously and doing repeatedly across project after project as an engineering organization, I would definitely want to have my own toolkit for it just so that I can own my own destiny, really.
All right, so here's one. What are the engineering challenges in implementing AWP at execution stage?
Well, quite simply, if you're implementing AWP at execution stage, you're not doing AWP because AWP needs the advanced part of AWP needs to start earlier than the execute stage. That being said, the value is diminished if you don't start until the execute stage. You are playing catch up. You haven't done the foundational elements, defining your construction work areas, breaking your schedule down to align to the engineering path of construction, etc., etc. Something as simple as your estimate, for example. As you go through the FEL stages, the select define stages, you want to start aligning things like your schedule and your estimate to your granularity, your CWA breakdown. If you get to the execute stage and you haven't done that, then when we start cranking out CWPs and contractors start bidding on it, and they say, right, for this CWP, it's to 20,000 hours or whatever the number is, you're going to really struggle to validate that against your estimate to know whether that number that they're giving you is good or bad. Equally, likewise with the schedule, if you're starting AWP at the execute stage, you are in that old school approach where engineering is just going to be dropping whatever they can over the fence at you. So if you're at the stage where you're being asked to do AWP in the start of the execute phase, you need to do those foundational steps very, very quickly and you need to then try to rationalize the engineering delivery to support what little influence you can have with the path of construction. So other than that, you're just down to doing workface planning. Then you're just building those IKEA level packages in the field, and that's all you can do.
All right, let's do one more question. Where can an organization get sample data requirements?
Yeah, so CAI put out data requirements, that is available on their website. We actually were involved in the review of that. We also have for O3, we have our own set of data requirements, obviously very similar to CAI's, because quite frankly, the requirements for what you need to support the technology is fairly standard. So for those data standards, either come and ask us, drop us a line, drop us an email, we can share ours with you, or if you're members of CII, go through their website, look for AWP, and look for the data standards.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. That looks like that's going to be all the time we have today for questions. So I will leave you with some information that you can go check out on our website, including case studies, past webinars. We have plenty of videos explaining our solutions as well as just industry challenges and how you can overcome them. There's a multitude of resources there for you, not just about O3, but just some things you can take away. There's a AWP implementation toolkit that you can download for free. So please check all of that out. And you can stay connected with us on social media. Follow us on LinkedIn, and you can sign up for our monthly newsletter. That way you never miss another update or event. And if you have any more lasting questions, I encourage you to email us at info@o3.solutions. Or again, you can contact us on our website there at www.o3.solutions. So we will see you next time. Stay tuned for our next webinar. It'll be at the end of April. Thank you to Andrew for presenting today, and thank you to everyone taking time to listen to what we have to say. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend. Thanks again.
Thanks. Bye-bye.